Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the latest episode of 3D Espresso. My name is Wes McDermott, and I am a creative 3D evangelist working at Adobe. And I'm thrilled to be here again today to talk just some cool art stuff. Today we're going to be taking a look at Project Neo. We're going to talk about Illustrator, a little bit of Fresco, some Photoshop, just a bunch of stuff, really. And so, you know what? Once again, on this episode, I have failed to have a cup of coffee with me, even though we keep calling this 3D Espresso. So today, what I have is my sparkling water bubbly here, which is orange cream. It's pretty good. Maybe one day I'll start drinking some coffee. But anyways, let's just jump into what we're going to be covering today. If you have any questions in the chat, just drop them in. I'm trying to monitor the chat as well, kind of looking back and forth, but happy to try to, look at the questions live. And if there's anything I can answer, I'd be happy to do so. So again, any questions, throw them down into the chat. All right, so let's take a look here at what we're going to be working on here today. So this is Photoshop, and I kind of have a little space theme going today. I do love space stuff. Can't get enough of that. So it's always fun to, jump in and work on some things that you really have fun with, So this here is Photoshop, and this is part of the artwork that I'm going to be kind of creating here today, or showing you what I'm doing. And you can see that I have this kind of embroidered version of this like space adventure theme that I'm kind of going with. This is using some of the parametric filters that are in the Photoshop beta. We'll talk about that stuff as we get into it a little later. But overall, you'll see that this is kind of the vector artwork that I'm starting with, which is going to be created in Project Neo. And if you don't know what Project Neo is, just hang tight. We'll get to it in just a second. But long story short, it's basically like our 3D illustrative application. And so I'm going to create this vector artwork. I'm able to tweak all that stuff inside of Illustrator and then bring it into Photoshop to, play around, create some different filters. Here's like an old distress-looking kind of poster, stuff like that. But the one that I always have the most fun with is this one here, which is this embroidery patch thing. Again, I'll show you how to do this. It's super simple, more than you would possibly think, but it's fun. I mean, basically everything you do looks good embroidered is kind of like what I like to say about it. All right, so let's jump in and start taking a look at Neo to start off. So here is Project Neo, and you can get to it here at the top of the screen. Here, I'll zoom in on it so you can take a look. It's projectneo.adobe.com, and what this is a web-based 3D modeling application. And don't let that scare you if you're thinking, whoa, 3D modeling. You'll see it's super, super simple and easy to use. So once you've logged in, Neo's free to use as well, but once you've logged in with your Adobe ID, you can come over here to your files section. And here is where I can start, creating new projects. And you can see that I have this little rocket ship project that we'll get to in just a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to hit the create button. And we're going to create just a brand new 3D file here. And I'm just going to show you some basics of working inside of Neo. And so when you start off, you'll see that we get this kind of 3D view scene. And I can use my right mouse button and just click and drag to kind of orbit around the scene. So by checking this out, you can see that we do, in fact, have ourselves a full 3D environment that we can work with. And there's a couple ways that you can interact with Neo that's pretty cool. If we look up here at the top of the UI, you have mouse and trackpad. So if you're just on a laptop just playing around, you can actually enable trackpad, and you can use your trackpad. You don't even need a mouse. Neo's pretty simple to get into. So just a little bit of housekeeping stuff here with Neo. Let's just take a look at just get a little bit of aware of our surroundings. So over here on the left side, we'll have some tools that we can work with. And then we also have a bunch of primitive shapes. So we'll jump into that and see what's going on there. I do see a comment here. No matter how often I get tricked today, I am in the same boat. You know what? I didn't even think about this being April 1st, April Fool's Day when I was doing the stream. And then I was thinking, and I've already been fooled a bunch today too. So I don't know. I just always forget that it's April Fool's Day. So I will say right now, no April Fools during the stream. I usually stay away from it completely, so don't worry about that. But yeah, really funny. Like, again, why would I do a live stream on April? It's like, what am I doing to myself? But anyways, like I said, we got a bunch of primitive shapes here to the side. You got some little camera controls, some styles. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then over here on the right side is like your properties. And so you'll see that you have this artboard. Now, this is one thing I want to really bring to your attention is that Neo, I like to think of it, it's kind of like an extension of Illustrator, almost like Illustrator 3D in a way, if we want to look at it. Now, I know there are 3D tools inside of Illustrator, like you can extrude some shapes and stuff like that. But Neo lets you work in a much more kind of broad and freeing way, as you'll see. It's a lot easier to work with. And so you'll see things like your artboard, which is what we're working on here. And I have this frame. We can turn this on and off. Usually I'll turn this off, but the frame is kind of nice. Like if you're doing something like, I'm working on an Instagram story post or something, you can kind of frame up what your shots are going to look like. And by shots, I just mean like, again, it's like your artboard canvas. So let's think of it that way. So I'm just going to turn that off for now because it does get a little bit annoying. Okay, so I'm just using my mouse wheel to zoom in and then my middle mouse button on my mouse to kind of pan around. So you've got your right mouse to kind of orbit around your scene, the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and then your middle mouse button, click and drag. And then like I said earlier, don't worry if you're not using a 3-button mouse. It all works with a trackpad just, on your laptop, which is awesome. Okay, so we have a couple other controls here, like things like your environment. You can change, do I want a gradient, something like that. We can change the color. You've got this camera. This is something that's pretty cool, actually. So right now, we're looking at what's called a parallel perspective. But if we turn this on to perspective mode, you can see that you actually get some, perspective distortions. And you can change this by changing things like, think of it like you're looking through a camera. You can change like the lens and stuff like that. Or you can do this isometric view. This is awesome if you're trying to do any type of isometric illustrations. And Neo, as I'll point out here as we get through this, makes this a lot easier to do. But for now, I'm just going to keep it in this parallel view. Okay, so with that said, let's jump in and start looking at using Neo. So first things first, I have two shapes here. And I can just mouse over a shape, and if I just left click on it, it will select the shape. And so here I have my standard, go-to cube, right? And here you have this little widget, this transform widget. And if you grab these little arrows, you can move this object in space, up and down, left and right, and forward and backward. And you can also use some of the widget controls, like I can scale the shape up, so on and so forth. But if we click this little edit button, this takes you into something that I think if you're using Illustrator will be a little bit more familiar to you. So for example, you can see that there is just this basic vector shape that I have. And I can grab these little controls on the side and I can change the shape, which in a sense is changing the volume of the 3D shape, which is a pretty cool way to think about it. So you can do some neat things like, for example, if I grab these little edges, just like in Illustrator, I can round these edges a bit. I can also play around with some of these controls here. Now, everything that you're working with is going to show up here in the shape tools over on your right side. This is like the properties panel. So for example, if I zoom in here and I can look, this shape at the top has got kind of a hard edge. But if I play around here with the top corner, I can essentially kind of soften or bevel that edge a little bit. And I can either use this top corner slider or this new little widget that we have here. So I can grab this guy. So we can play with the bottom and top corner. And depending on the shape, you're going to have just different controls. Like, for example, if I want to create a hole in the shape, I can do this. And now I've got this little shape that has a hole. Pretty interesting. Let's see, what else can we do? First off, we could just change the color, right? So this white is kind of bright. It's kind of getting in my, kind of bothering my eye a little bit. So let's come over here to Appearance, and I'll click this little color swatch. And I'm going to give this kind of like this, something like this little orange kind of red, something like that, right? And so now I've got this different color. All right, let's go back to our shape. And like I said, I can play around with the shape. I'm rounding the corners just by playing with the widgets here. And then when I hit done, I can go back to the transform widget. Now, this guy also lets me change the scale and size. So if I click this little box or cube, I can extend the top or bottom. So I can do this. If you hold down your Option key and click, it will do both sides at the same time, which is pretty good. So let's get something like this, right? We're just going to play around with the shape. Okay, so we have a shape. What can we do with it? Well, let's look at combining shapes, and that's going to be the core of working in Neo. You're creating a shape, and then you're combining it, very much like you would do in Illustrator. So one thing I could do right off the bat is I could create a new shape, and we'll do that later. But for now, I'm just going to hit Command D on the keyboard, and it's going to duplicate this shape. And then I can just drag this shape here in space, and now I have these two cubes like this. Now, speaking of the number of assets you have in your scene, there is this little bar here, and this is like a little mini layer editor. And you can see that if I zoom out, I can click on the first layer, which is going to be this little ground plane. Then I have my first cube and my second cube. And so, like I said, this is like a little layer outline tool. You can click and drag and reposition layers just by dragging them around in this little window. This guy's pretty helpful to move around, right? This is the mini layer widget. However, if you come over here to the properties, and there at the top here you see layers, there is an actual layer editor, and you can come into here and you can rename these. Like I could call this cube 2 if I wanted to. Let's see here. We'll just do this just so you can see it. So I can rename these things, right? And you can toggle their visibility on and off. So think of this kind of like working with layers inside of Illustrator. So that's what that does. All right, let's go back here to our properties. Now, let's look at combining these shapes. We have two shapes, right? So we're going to select this guy. I'm going to move him over and then just push him down into this shape. Okay, so that could be, I guess, one way, but that's pretty lame, right? It's not really doing anything. So what you want to do is come over here and look at the properties panel and look at this combine section. So you have these ways of combining shapes. Now, if you're, again, using Illustrator a lot, this is kind of like using the Pathfinder tool inside of Illustrator. So for example, check this out. If I come over here and do a carve, I can carve this one shape right outside of the other. Now, it looks a little weird on the edges because the shapes were overlapping, but if I just change the scale, let's see, let's do this. Let's hold down my Option key here and just push this in. Now, check this out. I get this nice little carved shape. And this is where things get really fun because now I'm essentially just working with like Play-Doh. Look at this. No matter where I place this shape, it's like cutting into all the surfaces because I have this carve. Pretty neat. And I can, play around, just do all kinds of different shapes here. I could take this guy and duplicate him and move this over and just make different shapes all together. Let's undo that for a second. So undo. Let's get our little shape back. Some of the edges look kind of hard, right? So I can play around with the bottom corner, the top corner, stuff like this, just to get different kind of levels. You have your inflate, which I can inflate the shape, and so on and so forth. So right now, we're combining the shape with a carve, but we could also do other things, like I could do an intersect. So it's going to give me an intersection and leave a new piece of geometry behind, which is kind of fun. I could do, like I said, a carve, but let's look at what happens when we start to blend these things together. So instead of a carve, I'm going to switch this back to add, and now you'll have a blend slider, and this is going to allow me to blend or mix these two shapes. So now if I do a blend, check this out. These two shapes just kind of like mold together. So again, it's like Play-Doh or clay, and I'm just taking two blobs of clay and pushing them together and then just, helping blend them. So look at this. You can get this cool little like melding of these two shapes together, which is neat. Now, we are basically kind of combining geometry, but this also works with color. So let's say that I have my second cube, right? And I'm going to click this button, and this time I'm going to switch this to like a blue. And now, not only is this blending the geometry, but it's also blending the color around. So now if I grab this little arrow widget, this lets me move the shape just in screen space. So I'll grab this guy and move it. And then check this out. You can get, because of the blend, it looks like these shapes are just interactively combining together, which is really neat. So you can get some really neat kind of blending shapes. Look at how it just melds into the ground or melts into the ground as well. It's because of all these shapes are just kind of blending together. If I didn't want this blending to happen on the ground as well, it's like this order of operations. I could take the ground and just drag it up above that blue cube that's blending, and now the blue cube will blend with the kind of reddish looking cube, but it won't blend with the ground. So you can get these it's like they have this kind of magnetic attraction here, which is kind of neat. And speaking of that, check this out. We can also change different versions. So instead of blending with an add, let's blend with a repel. So now you have one shape is trying to repel against the other shape. So we'll do something like this. Let's extend this guy out. And now if you look, you can see that it's like they're kind of bouncing around off of each other. So this one can come in and kind of push and bend this other shape around in kind of fun, interesting ways. And when you look at it like this, Neo becomes just like this really fun little playground for combining and just moving shapes around. So it's really, really kind of fun to play with. And then you have all kinds of different shapes that you can start to work with. So for example, let's say that I love this egg shape here. So I'm going to select the egg shape. Now, once I do that, you can see that it gives me this little widget with a little point. So this lets me position. It's basically giving me like an origin point of where I want to put this shape. So for example, let's put the egg shape here at the top. So now I have a new shape. To get to my edit mode, I just tap the V key on the keyboard. So again, same keyboard shortcut as Illustrator. And now I have this little egg. But what's neat with the egg is I can go in and edit, and each shape is going to have its own kind of editing shapes or controls. So with this, I can get maybe a shape that looks more like this shape here. So it becomes really easy to, like I said, mimic and play around with these shapes like this. And then we could give this guy a color as well. So maybe we do something like a green, and then here I can increase my blending. And so now I'm just figuring out kind of interesting ways to kind of, make these shapes kind of blend together and get different results. And it just, like I said, it just becomes this really fun interactive playground as you start to play around with shapes. Now, something else you can do that's kind of neat is if we come down, there's a couple repeat options. So if I turn on the mirror mode for the X axis, let's see what this guy does here. And I move this over. So here you can see that as I rotate and move, here, let's take this guy and put it more here in the center, right? So let's just say I'm trying to make like a little fun character here. You can get like some neat little shapes like this, because like this is starting to look like little cat ears to me, right? And you can kind of play around with that. So now we could do something like, let's duplicate the shape once more. Because the shapes are additive with blend, they're kind of combining on top of each other. But here, we'll do this. We'll scale this one down. We'll move this one out. We'll set him to a carve. Let's see what that does. And now we can, let's scale it back up and push it in. And now we can get like a different result here just by carving. We could even decrease our blending mode quite a bit. And let's do something like this, and then we'll carve into the surface. And now you can see, this is starting to look a little bit more like some kind of like, cat or fox ears or something like that. But you can see that just really quick, I've gone from just a basic cube to some, really weird looking shapes here, right? This guy is still using, let's see, we'll go ahead and blend him in. And this one is using a carve. Let's see, an add. We could do a repel. Just all kinds of different shapes to this to get what we want, right? And like I said, it just becomes fun to kind of go in and try to build out these shapes and get the overall scene that you want. Now, what's kind of fun about this, too, is the different modes that we're working with. So, for example, let's take this ground plane and just get rid of it for now. So here I've created nothing but just some obscure-looking weird shape, right? So nothing really cool is going on here with this guy. Let's take the blending mode up. So I can see my blending's not working. Order of operations, I could drag this guy up above, and now that's blending. So just think about that. And that's why this little mini layer widget becomes so handy that you can work with it really quickly like that. Okay, so now we got this little shape here. Let's do this. I don't know, just kind of playing around. I don't even know what this is. It's just a weird shape. Okay, but check this out. If we now want to go and look at kind of different styles for this, we could jump over our styles. And right now it's rendering like what's called realistic, but you could throw this into vector art. So now this is doing a vector illustration to this, and we can play around with a bunch of different settings to this, right? So under our styles, I can change, the outline's a little too thick, but I could get something like this. Now, say this is a vector illustration here. Now what you can do is come over to the little light option and rotate the light to change the lighting angle. So what's neat about this is imagine trying to draw something like a shape like this inside of Illustrator with all these blends and curves, but then I've gone in and have some kind of like drawing shapes or some shadows for the scene, but then I like want to make a change. And let's say that, oh, I want to move this shape over here, or maybe even duplicate it and get something like, say, this. It's really awesome how all of this kind of is blending and moving together as I work through this. And then again, for me to change the light angle, it's just a matter of me dragging a slider around. And now, imagine having to like redraw all this if I needed to, inside of Illustrator. It would be a pain, right? But you can do this in Neo really, really quickly. There's also some other interesting styles like the pixelated style. So we could do something like this. You can change your pixel style, so do some cool pixel art. And then there's also this kind of illustrated version, which is like kind of do like more of like a sketch, just like I said, painterly type looks and stuff. And again, you can go in and play and have a lot of fun with all this kind of stuff. It's really interesting. Now, this has just been a quick rundown of Neo. It's super, like I said, simple to play with. You can get in. You don't even have to watch tutorials or anything. It's just a matter of getting in and just trying some different things. We do have like ability to, edit shapes, which is just clicking the A button. So just like inside of Illustrator, click a shape, click A, you can edit the shape, click V to go into the move tool, and we can move this stuff around. There's also an ability to add text. So if I wanted to add some text in here, I could do that as well. So now if we look at this guy, it's getting really weird, but that's okay. We like weird today. Let's move this guy, grab him, move my little shape here so we get some text. And if you look, you can go in and type some text. We'll say, hello, Neo. And then in here, and see if it's loading correctly, we have search fonts. You have a list of all the fonts as part of Adobe Fonts, right? So we can do like all kinds of different fonts. This is now a 3D object in space, and we can scale it, play with it. Here, let's take this back here to our vector art. So we can get stuff like this. We can, scale, reposition. We can even have this do weird stuff like blend into the other shapes. It's just, it's just such a sandbox of creativity to play with Neo. So jump in and take a look. And like I said, you have all your basic shapes. They're all editable. You have text tools, things like that. You have your properties, a couple different styles, so on and so forth. But once this is done, you're thinking, okay, well, what would I do with this horrific thing that I have here? What would I do with it? Well, what you could do is you could come over here to share, and you can, share this, of course. But really what you would want to do is download this. And from the download here, you could send this into Illustrator. Since I'm using this vector style, I can send this into Illustrator as a vector art, right? And we're going to do that when we actually look at a real project. So right now, this has just been a quick, hey, let's just get our bearings. Let's see what Project Neo is about. Let's just jump in and take a quick look. So now what we'll do, I can jump out of here, go back to my files, and I'm going to delete this horrible artwork here because I can't stand what that looks like. And now we're going to look at how we could build up this rocket scene, okay? So before we do that, one of the things I want to take a look at is just some idea of concepting and things like that. So let me jump over here. I've got a little scene that I'm kind of preparing, and here, let me transition over to this guy here. So what I'm working at here is just a couple ideas around creating some different rockets, right? And I'm using Fresco on the iPad, which I love using for just coming up with concepts and illustrations. And you can see here that what I was thinking of was like, oh, I want to make like a little kind of toy retro rocket. So I jumped into Fresco and started doing a bunch of illustrations here. And what I wanted to do was just kind of showcase to you a little bit about the process that I typically use for stuff like this. So first things first, let me show you this. Let's come over here into my layer, and I'm just going to turn everything off, and I'll create a new layer. Now, one of the things I like to do, especially for thumbnailing, is I come over here to my properties panel, and I'm going to turn on symmetry. I love having symmetry on, and then I'll just go to a basic brush. And now, with symmetry on, I can go in and, as I start to draw on one side, you'll see here it starts to update on the other, which is pretty cool, especially when you're trying to, come up with different shape patterns, letting your mind kind of recognize these patterns. This mode is great for thumbnailing and generating ideas. So first thing I did is I jumped in and I just started sketching out some ideas for some rockets. So let's say that, you have something. So I kind of started with something like this, and then I was like, this was the first one that I did. So I was like, oh, let's do a rocket that maybe looks like, something like this, and it's going to have this big window here, and then we'll move this guy into place. It's going to have a little thing here for the where the fire, where the jet's coming out, stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that looks kind of interesting. Little rocket idea. Then what I do is grab my transform tool, scale it down, reposition it over, and then that's one idea. So then, we'll come over and we'll create like a new layer and do the same thing again. So this time, I was, thinking about different shapes. So let's try, a different shape here. So maybe we'll do, something that looks a little bit more like this. It's going to have, let's see, this time I want to create like a little bit of an engine here. So we'll say this guy has a little engine. It connects like this. It's going to have this little piece here. These are just quick scribbled ideas to kind of come up with stuff. And here, we'll put a little something on the side. I don't know what that actually is, but we'll give this thing a big opening, like a window that the space astronauts can look outside of, and then boom, there's another idea. But the thing that I'm kind of thinking about here and what I want to illustrate in this moment is thinking about shape language and how important that is. So here, I'm thinking about the overall kind of shape of this little rocket. And if you look in this section here, this is kind of like a big, large area. And then I'm using the concept of like, big, medium, small. So I've got a big shape that is giving me my overall silhouette. And then my little rockets here, these are like more of like medium or small shapes. And then I have these little bitty pieces coming out. This is a even smaller shape, and so on and so forth. So what I'm kind of generating here when I'm coming up with my ideas is this concept of shape contrast. So big, medium, small, so on, stuff like that. And so then, again, I would do the same thing, grab my transform tool, let's scale this guy down, move him over here. So that's another idea. And then I'll create a new layer and start the process over again. So this time it's just a matter of just kind of sketching out just different rocket pieces. And you can see that I'm just kind of letting my pen kind of go. I don't really know what I'm doing at this point, but I love how this symmetry works, right? It's really great for coming up with like ideas like this. So we're doing something like this here. Let's say that this is a rocket piece. Maybe there's, let's see, let's get something that comes out here for the wing or the fin of the rocket. So we'll do this one, and then maybe another piece that comes out on this side. So we get something like this. Maybe this here has got the window piece for the rocket. And again, there's another little piece here. I'm not thinking too much about what I'm doing, and I'm just kind of letting my mind try to see if it can figure out little shapes here and see what just kind of shows up in my head, right, as I go through. And this becomes like a really great way to thumbnail and come up with ideas on your own like this. And I love doing this because this is not only, is it kind of fun because, you're using your hands and you're getting involved into what you're doing, but you're also training your mind to recognize shape and form. And our brains are so good at that. Our brains are constantly trying to find patterns and order in chaos, right? And so, doing things like this, it helps train your brain to think and recognize patterns. So I don't know what that is. maybe it's some type of little rocket ship, but good enough. That's just a quick idea on the fly, right? So we'll take this and we'll move this in. And, when I was kind of practicing and trying to learn how to do this, it's hard. Like, it's super hard to learn how to do. But it's just a fun thing that you can do, and it's a quick way to create artwork. And, especially with, how things are with the idea of generating everything. Like, I think it's fun to generate these things in my brain, use my hand to see what's happening here, just play with it and so on and so forth. So basically what I had here was a couple ideas for some things, right? So the next thing that I kind of did in this, let's see if I can get this to come back where I need it to be. Let's see, where is this guy? Yeah, here. So there was one idea that I kind of wanted to stick with, right? So I kind of went through my process like, okay, I'm going to stick with this guy. So I could then, save this out as an image or whatever, send it over to Illustrator and start making some vectors for this. But what I want to do is I'm just going to use Fresco to do it because Fresco has these amazing vector brushes that are really good for that. And again, there's all different workflows. I'm just showing you the way I like to work. The reason why I'm doing this, you might be thinking like, hey, weren't you just showing Neo? Why are you over here? Well, the reason why I'm doing this is A, I want to generate some concept ideas, and B, I want to showcase to you guys a new option inside of Neo, which lets you import SVG files that you can then extrude and play with in 3D space. And so I have found that using something like Fresco is a really good way to do that. So here, let me show you this. I'm going to make a new layer. And I've got this brush here, which is a vector brush. And I'm just going to create like a vector shape. So here's what I'll do. I'll come in and on my brush, this is super important. I've got this smoothing, or not paint inside. Smoothing is up pretty high. It's like a lazy kind of a lazy draw to my pen, so I don't get those wobbly lines. Whoops, don't want that. Let's come in here. And you know what? For this, I'm going to turn symmetry off. And I'm going to go in and I'm just going to kind of trace out a little line here. So I get something like that. Now, if I hold after I've traced the line, sometimes it'll snap and do something like that. Just depends. I'll try it again, but sometimes if you do it just right, let's see if I can get it right. There we go. Look at that, super smooth curve. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to overlap my line like this and get another little curve. Okay, and I'll click or press down on my pen so it snaps. So I'll get this. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Hold. Let's see what this does. That's good enough. All right, so now I've got a little shape. Here's a really cool thing that you can do inside of Fresco with these vector brushes. So I have this little widget, look right here. You can see it. Hopefully it's showing up. It's this little like, I forget what it's actually called, but it's like this little control widget, right? And if I double tap on this and get this like blue outline here, this takes me into this trim mode. So I can just trim these little vector paths like this and get these super clean vector shape like that. Look at that. And it's really, I love this, you know, it's such a great little tool. And then what I'm going to do is grab my paint bucket tool and just fill. And now I've got a nice little vector shape that I can use. The next thing I did on this too was I did the same thing. Was I came over, grabbed a new layer, grabbed my vector brush, and then I'm just going to draw like a little line here like this. Let's see if I just press and hold. See, sometimes it doesn't do just right. So if it does that, I just kind of redo the line again, press and hold. That one worked really good. So I just wanted to get a line like this because what we're going to do, you'll see, is I'm going to do this revolve once we get this into Neo. So what I can do from here, if I export this, there's a couple really cool things. It says open a copy. You can actually send this to the Illustrator on the iPad or on the desktop, so either one. So I just click that button and I'm going to send it over to Illustrator on the iPad. So let me just go back to my desktop here. So now I'm back on my desktop and we're going to go to Illustrator and this is it here. So now I basically have those shapes that I did. So I've got this one, which is a vector shape, and this one. And then what I do is I come over here to, and you'll have to forgive me, I am somewhat new to Illustrator. So I'm learning this as I go, which is just fun. I just love that. Sorry, a little tangent here, but I got to say is like every day is like a new day or a new opportunity to learn something new. And that's just been my art journey, right? Every day I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn that. And you got to keep that, I like to call wonderment, right? You got to keep that inside you always. And then because you can learn new stuff all the time and it just really keeps the creativity just always moving in your brain. All right, so weird tangent aside, if I grab the shape, you can just drag these guys in here and I can export, right? So then I select these two guys and I export as an SVG. All right, let's bring this over to Neo again. So we'll jump back and we're going to create a new project. And I have my same little scene here, right? So sometimes what I like to do right off the bat when I have a Neo scene like this is I'll select this cube and I'll come in and I'll immediately turn on this X mirror and then move the cube. The reason I'm doing that is so that it just helps me to get bearing of the x-axis here. If you're a 3D artist, I'm a 3D artist first and foremost, so I'm used to seeing like a grid and widgets and stuff that's letting me know where I am in 3D space. Neo doesn't have that, which is fine. It just keeps things more simple. But for me, I like to do this just so I see what's going on, right? All right. So with that said, I'm going to import in an SVG. Okay, and I have one of these dudes out here. Let's hit my space bar to see what that is. Okay, that's that shape. Let's do, let's do this one. So we'll open this guy up. So that's going to bring in that little curve shape that I just created, right? And so it comes in and it's already extruded for me. And so I can move this down. Now, yes, you could try to make a shape like this with the primitives that you have here inside of Neo. And you can do that, and I can show you another way I could have made this body. But if you want to get something that's really specific beyond just basic kind of primitives, you can do a lot with basic primitives. And honestly, a cube, everything you can get from a cube, a sphere, and like a pyramid or a triangle, right? Everything. You can blend those together. Those are like the building blocks of art, in my opinion. But, if you want something more specific, you can do this here. So now I'm just going to snap rotate this guy up, scale it down, get something like this. So now that I have this shape, there's an option here under my shape properties. It's called extrude, so it's extruding the shape, but I could also just do a revolve. And so now this gives me this like crazy revolve. And if I just move my scale down, this is giving me that exact shape of my rocket body. Now, one thing that's going to happen here that I just want to bring your attention to, if I zoom in, there's some weird artifacting happening here. So one of the things that I like to do just to get rid of that is I do a slight inflate, just a slight one like this, boom, and that's going to take care of it. So that's just my little workaround. But now we get this little rocket body shape. Okay, that's one way we could do it. Another way, just to show you this, let me grab, I could have done this too. Let's do, I love the egg. You'll see me using this egg all the time. But here, I could grab an egg and come into here, undo that, hit V to go to my select tool, and I could scale the egg up. I could play around. Let's see, let's get something like that. Let's pull this piece down, pull this piece down. So you can see that I can almost get the same shape, right? Let's hit V. Let's move it up. And now I'll take this cube. Let's turn this to carve and then push it up. Whoops. Let's see. So here's where it's not here. See, it didn't work. And again, I got to think about my order of operations, right? So I think I need to put this below the cube and then boom, now it works. So it's just a thing to think about sometimes if you don't see something working. So I could do something like this and pretty much get the cube, right? But as you can see, it's not super exact. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I could do that, right? This is a simple shape too, right? So you could do that. I can just play with what you get, and I could have done the same thing here. But I'm just showing you how this works with the SVG import. Okay, so we have that. The color's terrible, right? So here's where we're going to come over to our appearance. Now, what I'm going to do is go to my styles, and I'm going to be working in vector art, and I don't want my outline, so let's turn these guys off. And now I am going to just delete the ground plane. So this is black. We don't want that. So you have a couple options. Here's how I like to work with vector art. I'm going to go to flat, go to my color, and set this to like a gray, like this. Now, if I go to split, now I have the flexibility to decide what my color is going to be and my shadow color. So here in the shadow color, I'm going to lower it down, and now I'm getting this nice kind of illustrative shadow here. And I'll take the highlight intensity and pull it up. So now I get this little highlight for my little rocket. So here we go. That's in place here. And then I could come over here to my light now and just play around with the rotation to this guy like this. All right, so let's import another SVG. And this time I'm going to use this one, which is my little, the fin or whatever it is to the side. So right off the bat, this black color is bothering me. So here's the technique I use whenever I'm using vector art. I go from, we'll select it. I go from shaded to flat. I'll set the color. This time I'm just going to use something like this value here. And then I go to split and set the shadow color down a little bit lower. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. Now I'm going to play with the extrusion on it, flip it around, and reposition this guy like this. And I can do all this in 3D space, which is great. And we'll reposition this guy here. So there's my rocket. Now I could, of course, enter into my repeat mode. Let's see if this works. Move this guy over. There you go. Look, this is a weird shape. Now it's, I don't know, some kind of bat or something, right? But now I'll just flip this guy around. I can see that the x-axis is off a little bit, and that's because of this shape. So I'm just going to move him here and then maybe scale him up and do something like this. So now you can see that I'm blocking in what my rocket shape is going to look like here. And then on top of this guy, I could start to, add more shapes as well. So for example, let's say like, let's grab a sphere, click. We grab our little sphere here. Let's take this sphere and let's do a carve. So it's now going to carve into the surface, and there's the little opening I have for my little rocket. Pretty awesome, okay? We could also try something like this. Let's duplicate it. And let's see if I make a, let's set this to add, right? And let's make a hole. All right, let's do something like that, okay? And I'm going to inflate it a little bit, okay? So now this is like kind of the edge of the window. And I can just push it down here into the surface. And again, you always got to look at everything from all your angles, but check that out. We get something like this here. Now again, just like I keep doing, I'll go to my appearance, flat. This time, maybe we want this to be like dark, and then go to split and shadow color, make it a little darker. So we get something like that. So there's the inside, part of my rocket, as we kind of put this guy together. Now, another thing that I want to showcase here, let's just for the sake of time, let me move out of this project, and we're going to jump into this one. So this rocket was built exactly the way that I just showed you. Same thing, nothing different. But what I did is I had the idea of the overall design that I wanted to have for the scene. So I set my Instagram story here for my frame because this is just how I wanted to frame it up. And you'll notice that I'm moving around in 3D space, which is great, but it kind of ruins my angle for what I actually want to export. So that's why you can come over here and you can choose these little snapshots. So if I save this as a snapshot, that will always be there. So let's say that I'm in here working and I want to work on this, and then I'm like, oh, let me get back to my scene, snapshot, boom, you're back. But what I wanted to show was this little planet. So the planet is just a big sphere, and then I have a bunch of little cylinders here. And the cylinders are just set to carve, and then I'm just pushing them into the surface like this. Okay, and that's giving me my little craters, and then I'm using a little bit of blending. So check this out. If we zoom in on it, without the blending, you get this really harsh. But a crater, it has a little mound to it, right? So that's why we're just going to introduce a little bit of blending here like that. And that's just going to, give me that little bit of, crater-like look, I guess. Okay, let's go back to my snapshot. So I just kind of randomly did that. Now, here's something else that's kind of neat. If you select a shape, and from this shot angle, I can hit Command D to duplicate it. Now, you'll see there's a little bitty white sphere in the middle of this gizmo. If I click on that and drag, it's going to move the shape along the surface of the sphere. And that is perfect for allowing me to say I want a crater right there, let go of my mouse, and now push him back into Z space, or into the surface, I'll say. So now I've got this little crater, and then I can scale it down and get this. Now, it looks dark in this section, but here's another great thing about what we're doing here. We could jump over to our light rotation, and I can change the light. So let's say that, oh, that's too dark. Imagine trying to illustrate this, and saying, oh, I want to change the light. I got to redraw all the vectors for my shadows. But here, I'm just going to change the light rotation and get maybe something that looks like that. So let's say that that's what I want to go with, right? And then I just had nothing crazy here. These are just spheres just designed in the background. So that's how I created this little rocket scene. To get the color, if I just go to the background solid, chose a color here. Now, what I do is from here, you go to download, and you can download this as a PNG, a JPEG, an SVG. You can even make an MP4 video of a turntable. So let's say that I want to do like a little boomerang. Watch this. If I do a start preview, it'll do like a little render here. Of course, you got to set up the camera like you want, but you can do something like this. Or you could just do a turntable like this, and it's going to, render you out a little video file around your scene. But what I want to do here is do a share, and I do this here. It says send to Illustrator as vectors. So let's do this really quick. I'll click this button, and it does this little export. All right, then it opens up this browser. It's going to say, hey, I'm going to open up Illustrator. Let's see, we'll give it a second. There we go. All right, it's ready. So I click open. And now if I jump over to Illustrator, there it is. So there is the actual file that I just created from Neo. Now, what's interesting about this is if I look at the layers, this is all like complete I mean, this is a bunch of layers. Like, this is it. Like, I can come into here. Let's say I can double click down into this guy. Let's zoom into it. Look, I have all my vectors. So if I wanted to, like, say, like, select, something here and make a change to this, I can do that. I can change, I can add to, I can do whatever type of, vector illustration editing that I want to do all here inside of Neo. I mean, sorry, now I'm in Illustrator, which is super cool, right? So we can do that. Let me show you another version of this guy that I have here. So how did I get to this? This was super easy. So I just grabbed a font and called it Space Adventure, and I believe that I used the retype so I could find like something that looks like space font. And then I just grouped everything. So if I select everything, I group, and then I've just used recolor in this case. So if you jump over here to generative recolor, and I'll do a search for, it should pop up with some things. I think I was doing, so I had this one called Retro Style Space Poster, and so I'll run this here. A question that came in here: if the gray of the rocket was the same as the gray of the moon, would it merge the colors? No, it's actually knows to keep them separate. That's a great question that just came into the chat. Let me jump back to Neo here and show you something. So when you do, another way you can control that is if you go to download and I hit SVG, you can use this option here to do split faces. And then I can't remember exactly how it's splitting the faces, but it has something to do with the intersections of the shapes, and it will always make a solid shape from that. So if you want to use SVG, you can do that, but it's already doing it, I believe, from the share, send to Illustrator. So it should keep them separated as far as I know. If it doesn't, let us know, and I can talk to the devs about that directly, but I think it should be fine, but that's a great question. Okay, so going back here to Illustrator, you can see I can kind of go through the scene, and now it's just, I can just click and just do different little styles, and that's all I did. I did something like this here. So once I had this, I just sent this into Photoshop. So if I come over here to Photoshop, I get back into this scene, okay? So let's go back here to my original file, which is this guy that came into Photoshop. So with him selected, and I'm using the Photoshop beta, so I do need to bring that to your attention, because the Photoshop beta has this new feature called Parametric Filters. And so if I open up Parametric Filters, you have a bunch of these filters here that you can use. You can even create your own. So that is something that's really cool. It's using a tool that we have. It's called Substance Designer, and it's a node-based tool for creating like procedural patterns. But the thing is super powerful because like that's what these are, these filters. They're called substance files. And within this Substance Designer tool, you can build your own filters for Photoshop. Like, for example, it's probably not going to work well, but let me just click on it and see. Here's one that I created and let me just play with it for a second here. I'll try to show you. But see what it's doing? It's trying to create like, and turn this into like what looks more like a kind of a paint or Illustrator. I got some brush strokes. I can, turn on the brush stroke. Let's turn that down, increase sharpness, just playing around with some of these, right? Smoothness, get something like that, shading, and so on and so forth. But it's trying to give me, if I zoom in on it, it's trying to make it look a little bit like it's destroying my text, of course. But some of it's kind of cool, though. Look, it's giving me this kind of cool look. But, it's super impossible to create filters in Photoshop. But this new tool allows you to do that, which is really, really cool. All right, let's go back and undo that. Get this guy back. Let's see. There we go. All right, so again, parametric filters. And then what I did was I did the embroidery filter. So I'll click on that, and boom, this thing just creates embroidery like this. It's so much fun. One of the things I'll bring to your attention on this, too, is your resolution. So you'll want to set this to at least high, right, whenever you're using this. But now I can go in and play with just parameters like the density. I can play with, is this thing an outline? So now it's just giving me outline. I want top stitch. Oh, that's kind of interesting, right? So it's just kind of fun. I can do fill and outline, something like this. I can play with the fill height. Let's see what this does. It's just, oh, that's cool. So look at that. So fill height gives me I wish I would have done that the first time. That's a better look. So yeah, it looks really cool. You can go in and just kind of play with this stuff here. The thickness of the threads, the length of the threads. What does that do? Yeah, that's kind of neat. maybe it's too much. Ooh, that one looks cool. So again, you'll do a lot of, ooh, that looks cool when you're playing with these. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun to kind of play with and get into, right? So that is going to kind of bring me here towards the end of what I'm creating here for this whole scene. So like I said, I went from, sketching some ideas in Fresco and then was over here inside of Project Neo, designing everything. I used this import SVG to help me get it. Now, in my case, the shapes were not super, complex. I could have created those from subtracting shapes in Neo, but you can imagine something a lot more sophisticated and how that SVG would really help you with that. And then once you're done, you can just send the vector. Now, again, you have to be in this vector art style for this to work, but as soon as you share this into Illustrator, you can then, go in and work with all of the different various vectors that are created and change and reconstruct them. So again, it's a lot of fun to kind of play with here. All right. So with that, like I said, that's going to end the stream here today. So I just want to thank everybody for just sticking around and just, listening to me blab on about, just creating some different artwork stuff. I love talking about this stuff. So if you're interested, give me a follow. Let's see. I'm on my Instagram is like, which one is it? It's this one. This is the Instagram one. And I think this one is the YouTube one. So yeah, I'm constantly posting like tips, tricks. I do tutorials on the YouTube channel, basically around everything around creative 3D. So it's like I'm trying to take a mix of 3D work and leveraging that with motion, design, animation. So if any of that stuff interests you, it would be super awesome to just chat with you. You can hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram, any of those places, and we can, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And like I said, just get out there and create. That's the biggest thing, especially in these days. It's like and that's why I love having the iPad in Fresco, is because I can just be sitting there. A lot of times I'm just watching something on Netflix and I'm just sketching away, right? And sometimes it's not even that you're trying to create something. This is just kind of the last little thing I wanted to just kind of end with is sometimes you're just making boxes and squares and little shapes and putting them together, and your mind will start to try to make patterns from that, and you'll be surprised at like, oh, that's a really cool shape, and then you can shade it in and go, oh, that looks like an alien head, or that looks like a rocket ship, or that looks like a cool vehicle, and then it sparks you an idea. And then with something like Neo, you can dive right into Neo with that, right? And take that concept of that thumbnail that you had, and you can start to, just bash shapes together and make something really cool out of that just in Neo. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to really bring something, to life like that. So it's a blast. It's really fun. And I just highly encourage you to, just get out there and try and play around with it. Well, thanks a lot for watching, and I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you on the next stream. Thank you.